everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast, episode number 49. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. This week on the show, I'll be reviewing 6 new titles that came out recently on Amazon. We have Gank, a LitRPG adventure. It is the Crucible Shard Book 4. We have Thousand Tales, Learning to Fly. After that, we have The First Player, which is the first book in the AlterGame series from Russia. After that, we'll have Stuck in an RPG, which is the second book in another series called Sucked Into an RPG. Very similar titles. After that, I'll be reviewing The Skull Throne. And then after that, it'll be last but not least, Super Sales on Superheroes, which is doing super. Okay, but of course, we're going to move on to our first section of the show, which is going to be LitRPG News. And in LitRPG News, we have one little news article. Aleron Kong, author of the Chaos Seed series, has created a LitRPG gaming group on Steam. So if you wanted a group with fellow lovers of LitRPG, you can now do so on Steam. So there you go, folks. We'll have a link in the show notes, of course, for you to click on. Now, there's only one new LitRPG audiobook that I could find this week. The Scout of Artemis, Press X to Loot, Book 1. I enjoyed the series, or the first novel. You can review my review either from the show notes or by looking at our LitRPG recommendation page. But it's pretty cool. The audiobook is not half bad either. Again, I always say that because narrators are appealing on an individual basis. So I recommend you go listen to a sample on Audible to see if the narrator's voice matches something that's appealing to you before you go purchase it. So again, we'll have a link in the show notes for you to use. Okay, out now, but I will be reviewing next week. As of most people will be watching this show on May the 12th, which is a Friday. But I do record it on the day before, which is a Thursday, so I can't always read everything that comes out that exact week, unfortunately. Now, this includes War in the Greenwood, which is going to be out on the 12th, and The Crystal Crusade, which, from the author, what it's told me, it'll also be out on May the 12th. So there you go. Now, just so that you know, I got an advanced copy of The Crystal Crusade, and I'm about a third the way through it at this point. And honestly, I'm really enjoying myself. It's a lot better than the first few percentage of its gives you an indication it's going to be. But I'll have a full review for you next week when I actually finish the entire book. Okay, on to upcoming LitRPG. This is where I just read out the titles that are coming up in the near future, this month and next month. We have Lion's Quest Trinity, Book 3, which is going to be the third book in the series, I should say, out on May the 15th, as long as everything goes okay for the author. The Eternal Dragonborn will be out on May the 31st. Eden's Gate, The Sparrow, will be out on the 31st as well. On to June 1st, we'll get The Hero of Thera. Also on the 1st of June, Conquest, a LitRPG story. On the 2nd of June, it'll be Fantasy Online Hyperborea. There you go. I got it right that time. Also on June the 2nd, Stay on the Wing, The Dark Obelisk Book 2. And then on the 6th of June, The Stone Raiders Return. And that's it for June as far as I'm aware at this point. Nothing else is up on pre-order. I've heard nothing from other authors. So there you go. Ending for July and August, there are things we have on our list. But rather than read it, you can just go look at it at our website at litrpgpodcast.com, the recommendation page, or on our Facebook page for this podcast, the LitRPG Podcast, and it'll be the pinned, the first pinned little post there as well. It'll go all the upcoming stuff and all the stuff I'm talking about today. So there you go. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, going to begin with Gank, a LitRPG adventure. This is book 4 in the Crucible Shard series, written by Skylar Grant. Okay, it is 215 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now I'm going to read you my kind of synopsis. At the end of the last book, Liam and his group planned to counterattack the elves that were invading his kingdom. However, the plan to attack the elves does not go as planned, and the airship they're on is forced to shift realities. Everyone ends up in a dating sim. Now, this is going to be about the 25 to 40% mark on the story. So there are going to be a few spoilers in this review, just to give you a heads up if you don't want to know them. Skip ahead to the next one. Just letting you know. Okay. Now this dating sim is actually kind of cool. I liked the change of pace that it provided to the story. A lot of the novels so far has just been action, RPG, fantasy stuff, and the fact that the author was able to incorporate new type of game mechanics in an existing story by shifting realities, I thought it was really neat, and I really liked this portion of the story. Was probably my favorite of this entire book. The game is kind of a combination time management system and social building game system. And it was just kind of a nice change of pace in my opinion. If you've ever played Persona 5, which is a really hot game right now, it's that non-combat stuff from that game. Very similar. And again, nice change of pace. Now, after that 40% mark, though, the game kind of falls off the rails for me. And this is where it kind of takes a nosedive. The elves somehow find them in this pocket dimension, and they have to flee. Now, in addition to, again, this is spoilers, in addition to be able to shift realities, now the story adds time travel, which to me is a huge red flag in any series that it's getting a little out of hand for the author and they want to try to rewrite some stuff. A lot of stuff happens in this time travel section, which I won't spoil. I'll just say that it does happen, but it changes the earlier timeline that's already been established up until this novel, and including like erasing memories, entire personality shifts for some characters, in addition to moving power structures within the larger game world that this exists in. And honestly, it feels, in some ways it's good because the story was getting really dark for some characters that happened in the previous book. And this was sort of a way for the author to undo that a little bit and modify that. I'm not sure if that's because of the reader response or whatever the case was, but that portion of it, I'm like, we'll have to wait and see what the actual results are for the story. But some of the larger changes are just really messy. And a lot of the rest of the story feels very shattered or fractured. There are a lot more like weird random events, like a lot of characters just go back to their home planes. There's a creation of a new pantheon. Again, main characters are just really changed, like their memories are changed and shifted because of that alternate timeline thing going on. And again, just the last half of the story just felt so messy and fractured. I had a real hard time enjoying it, and this is probably the least favorite portion of anything in the series just because it felt so scattered. And maybe it'll pick up in the next story. I don't know. I plan to read it still, but I really liked the first half, and just the last half kind of took it down a couple levels for me, unfortunately. So overall, again, I like the first half. I like that cool alternate game system setup. I thought that was a really cool pull for the series, but the last half was just so messy I couldn't really enjoy it as much. So the book gets a score of 6 out of 10 for me. Okay, on to our next story, 1,000 Tales, Learning to Fly. Ooh. This is written by Chris Skinny. I'm probably saying that wrong. Okay, let's see. It is 405 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, the 1,000 Tales series as a whole has always kind of been hit or miss for me as far as like it being lit RPG, especially in the first few books. You can actually tell that the author did not originally write this series as lit RPG. Rather, it was written as virtual reality sci-fi. And that's really evident in the first couple books. Now, as the series continued on, the author discovered the lit RPG genre. He made the decision to add more game elements. And he added just enough into the later standalone novels and later editions in the series to be lit RPG, as far as like my minimum qualifications go. He added enough obvious stated game mechanics and character progression according to the game mechanics to be lit RPG. So you don't have to worry about that this story is not lit RPG. It is. But even with those additions, the series has always had more of an emphasis on story than game mechanics and the development of characters, personalities, and their personal development through the 1,000 Tales virtual reality world. The entire thousands of VR are essentially a digital metaphor of heaven, because to get there, you have to die. Your brain is literally cut up and sliced into pieces, and it's scanned in this computer system, and your digital self is reborn into this world where you can be anything you want to. And I just mean have some class or some skills. You can literally be anything. You can be an ogre, a fairy, you can be plants, you can be ethereal angels, whatever it is. And in this case, in this particular story, the main character becomes a horse and then a Pegasus, hence the name of the title, Learning to Fly. And the story really does follow the same vein as most of the larger themes in the story. A pilot, tragic accident. He opts to join the Thousand Tales virtual reality world as a permanent resident, and he goes on a journey of self-discovery and adventure. Again, first as a horse, then as a flying Pegasus, and he goes on adventures. And there's a bunch of game, story stuff that happens. But essentially, it's a journey of self-discovery. And again, the story overall it's always going to be lighter on the game mechanics because it was never originally written as a heavy game mechanic LitRPG, and it's always going to be a part of the underlying structure. But for me, it wasn't a huge deal because I read the other stories and I already had a sense of how the game world works. But for people coming into the series expecting like a hardcore lit RPG story, this is not it. This is sort of like a LitRPG light with emphasis on, fantasy character development in a virtual reality world. But again, there's enough even in the story that it is technically a LitRPG, so I'm not going to immediately dismiss it. But for me, this story is also lighter on action that I personally like. And overall, it's not badly written at all. There are very few spelling errors. You can tell that it was really well edited and the author took the time to do so. It's just that it also didn't grab me by the seat of my pants and make me read it, in one sitting. I took like 4 or 5 over the course of the week. And I kept putting it down and picking it back up. And for me, this novel just doesn't really add anything to the series as a whole. It's just kind of like a nice little standalone adventure. And if you're a fan of the Thousand Tales series, you're going to enjoy the novel. It's just that, for me, again, it doesn't add anything new. So for me, it gets a score of a 6 out of 10. Okay, on to our next story. The First Player AlterGame Book 1, written by Andrew Novak. This is a Russian translation from something in Russian, obviously. But you actually get your first peek at this novel in Magic Jump Books put together a series of short stories, I want to say a couple months ago, from authors from Russia. And this was one of them, like a little small selection of it. So you get a smaller preview in that short story collection. Okay, this story is 314 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, full disclosure, I received an early copy of the novel to review. I, of course, purchased it outright when it became available. So there you go. Now, in the far future, the world has suffered a major catastrophe, plunging it into ruin. In this post-apocalyptic future, a small part of the population, the alphas, live behind an impenetrable barrier in a healthy, wealthy, advanced city. Everyone else, the Omegas, have to try and survive in the ravaged, mutated, resource-scarce wasteland that is the rest of the world. However, everyone plays the same virtual reality game, Altera. Now, when the ultimate wanderer and survivor, Jack, finds the remains of an old console, he logs into the game under the user's old account and is thrust into a set of quests that could bring him fame and fortune if he survives being hunted by greedy guilds, relic hunters, and cruel necromancers. Okay, that's kind of my synopsis of the story, folks. Okay, this is one of those novels that takes place as much in the real world as it does in the virtual reality, so be aware that if you don't want to read that kind of story, this is not the novel for you. I want to say at least half of the story takes place in this real world, future post-apocalyptic world. The other half is entirely in the virtual reality world, so it's going to be like an even mix. But for me, that didn't pose a problem in itself because the virtual reality world, the real world was really interesting. I'm a big fan personally of like post-apocalyptic zombie survival kind of games, stories, I should say. Playing games. I am. So that's part of the story was entertaining for me. However, the descriptive difference between those two worlds was an issue. And I'll get into that in a minute. First, let's talk about things I enjoyed about the story. I liked the real world. The post-apocalypse setting is wonderfully described. I could really picture myself in the desolate wastelands of this world. Everything from characters to the mutants that roam the wild parts of the world are really utterly fascinating to me. And this is one of the few instances where I don't mind spending so much time in the real world portion of the story. Again, I kind of like this kind of story, though. If you don't like that kind of story, this is definitely not the novel for you. But if you're cool with post-apocalyptic stories, I think you'll enjoy this. If for nothing else than just that part of it. Additionally, I enjoyed the main character, Jack. He's hard as nails when he needs to be, but of course he has a heart of gold. He has a soft spot in his heart for the weak and needy. He's a really fun, interesting, good-hearted character. I liked him. I could empathize with him, so that's always good. I additionally liked the fact that there were real world consequences for what the main character does in game. Very often in these kind of stories, it's just everything that happens in game stays in game, outside of maybe making some money. In this particular instance, because the power structure within this world is based on, in part, on this game that exists, that both the lower class Omegas and the higher class Alphas both play and struggle in. This creates an interesting real world consequences for the things that the main character does and kind of unlocks within the storyline. And I thought that was kind of cool. Of course, there's an interesting meta theme about the underdog struggle of the low class citizen against the well-funded, powerful upper class, which is, a nice underdog story. I'm a big fan of that. Now, on to things that I did not like about the story, though. One of the fundamental problems with this particular story is that it asked me to suspend my sense of belief just a little too far. Again, I'm a big fan of post-apocalyptic stories. I've read tons of them. Zombies, just the electricity goes out, whatever it is. I like them. I think they're interesting. But one of the things that is very common in that survival is of primary importance. And most of the characters in those stories spend most of their time surviving humans, surviving traps, trying to find food, shelter, building groups, whatever the case is. They have very little free time. And that was kind of a stretch in this particular story because everybody seemed to have enough free time to play a game. And that to me was just like a little bit of a stretch of the imagination too much. I couldn't imagine the people from The Walking Dead, just kicking back, putting on a virtual reality helmet for like 8 hours a day to play a video game. So that part was a bit of a stretch for me. But if you can get past that, like I did, it shouldn't be an issue. Other things that I didn't really like about the story is that the virtual world was not as well fleshed out as the real world, which to me is a huge problem as a lit RPG story, because most of the people who read these kind of stories do it for the game stuff, not necessarily for the real world stuff. And so if the game world isn't really fleshed out, that's a big draw away from it. And again, there's a lot of lore in the story, especially in the game world. It's just that there's not a lot of descriptive text that makes the virtual reality world feel as real as the real world. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe that they're intended for this virtual world to feel like a hollow shell so that the real world felt more important. And if it is, that's an author's choice. I'm just letting you guys know about it because several points in the story, I cared more about what happened in the real world than in the virtual world. So there you go. Early on, additionally, the story feels a little awkward. Now, for me, that might just be translation issues because, again, this is translated from Russian and not everything translates perfectly. So that could be the instance here. And again, overall, I like the story. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. There were just things that kept knocking it down from being like a really great or good book for me. Again, there's enough game mechanics in the story that it is a little RPG, but don't expect a ton of detail about the game world. That was another issue for me. There are levels and there's experience and all that stuff, but how the game world actually works in a fundamental level isn't really provided. It's more of a setting for an adventure series. And again, there's enough that it is LitRPG and it meets my minimum qualifications, but don't expect a ton more than that. Okay, so overall, again, enjoyed it. But again, half the story wasn't as enjoyable as the other half. So it gets a score of a 6 out of 10 for me. There you go. Okay, next story. Stuck in an RPG. Book 2 in the Sucked in an RPG series. Written by 2 authors who go by the pseudonym DJ Stone. Okay, this is 281 pages, $3.99. It is available in Kindle Unlimited, which is always nice to see. Now, honestly, book 1 was not good. I had huge criticisms about the series, about the first book. I don't even think of it as LitRPG personally, because it even though there were game mechanics, it felt like it was just a weird. It didn't feel like it was meaning to really be later. In my opinion, the author was testing the waters to see how much their current reader base would accept this as a LitRPG story and not rebel. Because most of the stuff the authors previously were like teen romance, fantasy, urban fantasy stuff. And so I understood this is a big switch for them. And I gave that first book a 3 out of 10. I didn't like it at all. However, the second book in the series really feels like a reboot for the entire franchise. I would really skip book 1 and just jump into book 2. There's absolutely nothing in book 1 that you need to read other than saying that these 2 characters are trapped in a game. Okay. From the very first pages of book 2, it feels like a lit RPG story. Finally, it feels like the author took whatever criticisms they got, listened to it, did their research, and finally just said, okay, this is going to be a lit RPG story, and we're going to go whole hog into it. And that's, to me, the way you should write one of these stories. It shouldn't be tentative. It shouldn't be, oh, we're just going to do a light sheen of game stuff and hope they don't notice. It's whole hog game stuff there all the time. I mean, that's kind of the core of what people enjoyed about LitRPG, the RPG stuff. And this does it. All the NPC awkwardness from the book 1 is gone. The game rules have conveniently changed on this new continent that the two characters are moving to. That can really make the entire story more of a lit RPG story. So yay, really good. I like. There's a lot of improvement in here. Overall, even though there's like this larger quest theme from the first book, kind of carrying over with the two main characters trying to search for a way out, it really is just a couple of teens going on adventures and questing on a new continent, and that's perfectly fine. It's a very enjoyable story in those boundaries. I mean, it's not epic fantasy. There's no huge world altering stuff going on. It's just quest. Hey, do you want to go home? Quest. Hey, let's try to get home. Quest. Cliffhanger. Really, that's what it is. And that's fine. But it's still a really big improvement over book 1, who I gave a bad score to. Again, at the end, just to reiterate, there is a cliffhanger. One of the main characters, you don't know what's happening to them, and it just kind of ends. So be aware of that. If you're not a fan of cliffhangers, that's what happens. This book, is a big improvement. Still not amazing, but it's still a lot better than the last one. It's a score of a 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to The Skull Throne, a lit RPG novel of the Kingdom of Heaven, Book 1, written by two authors, J.A. Cipriano and Connor Cressley. You may remember J.A. Cipriano from the LitRPG series, the Soulstone series. Writing partner Connor Cressley has written with him on another series called the Half Demon Warlock Urban Fantasy series. So there you go. They're writing partners already. Okay. It is 200 pages, about-ish. Amazon doesn't give you an exact page count as of this recording. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Be aware the last 12% of it is not actually this story. It is a glossary, and it is also the sample chapter from J. Cipriano's Ring of Promise. So just a heads up. Okay, my summary of the story. The beginning of the story starts in-game right before the group of players enters a secret high-level area in the game, virtual reality full immersion game. Then it suddenly shifts to a bunch of real-life stuff for Jack, the main character, who gets kicked out of his sister's house after financially supporting her and her newborn for years. This is basically the woe is me section of the story, as I call it, where the character has to go through a bunch of horrible stuff for him to essentially want to go into a virtual reality game world full-time or permanently. And in this case, it's meant to justify the main character's willingness to just follow some random stranger into a room where he gets transported to this game world. And again, this is a little bit spoilery. It turns out that this virtual reality game world is really an intersection of multiple afterlives, and the game that Jack has been playing for years is really was a magical scheme to test out which humans are worthy of being transported to their world. I know it's a little convoluted, but hey, it is what it is. Now Jack has a chance to become the ruler of this place, of this virtual world, or this real world, whatever it is, if he can secure the Skull Throne before the evil shadow does. So there you go. That's my summary. Okay, some things that I like. Main character, Iron Jack, likable. He's interesting. Well, he's kind of whiny, but he's still interesting in his own way. He's a reluctant hero who doesn't always do the right thing, which is always better than just your diddly do right character. It's definitely more interesting than that. Combat scenes in the story, whenever they are, they're good. Well written, lots of cool action. There's lots of engaging scenes that make you want to turn the next page. And those are all the great things about the story that I really liked. However, there are some things that I did not like about the story. There's not a lot of explanation about the game mechanics in the beginning of the story. And even overall, there's not a lot of stuff in the story that explains all the details of the world as much as I would like personally. If you go back to the glossary, you actually get a better description of the individual game mechanics, but there is sort of a presumption of kind of gamer foreknowledge within the story. that you may or may not have. And heck, most of the game stuff doesn't really even happen until like you're 33% into the story, so about a third of the way. And before that, most of the story is just getting Jack into the game world and pushing Tim to agree to try to take this cult around. Again, half the story is kind of spent in one way or another bullying and berating the main character into doing everything in the story. He shows very little interest in furthering the plot on his own. And even when he does agree to kind of take the Skull Throne and to get more powerful to do it, all of his power is kind of handed to him. And so he does very little to improve himself. Especially when he comes to do challenging the shadow. It feels like the main character is led around by his nose in one way or another throughout the entire story, whether it's by the good guys or the bad guys or wherever. And that just kind of drew away some of the enjoyment. Still, pretty decent engaging read. Overall, had a good time reading the story. Again, there's some flaws and things that could have been done better, but it is what it is, and I enjoyed reading it. It gets a score of 7 out of 10. Okay, last but not least, this is actually a really enjoyable novel heads up. It is Super Sales on Superheroes, written by William D. Orand. He's the author of the Other Life LitRPG series, and this novel already has a ton of great reviews on Amazon. It has, as of this recording, it has over 90 reviews, most of which are 5 stars. So there you go. It is 350 pages, about, again, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, main character, Felix. He lives in a world of superheroes and villains. His town was recently taken over by the villains, and now all the heroes have bounties on them. The city now allows all the vices that you can think of, including slavery. Now, Felix, however, is really only concerned with making a few extra bucks using his minor superpower, the power to modify anything he owns using an RPG-like interface. One day, he accidentally buys an enslaved superhero and decides to test his upgrade powers on her. Then another, and another. And there you go. That's kind of my summary of the overall plot of the story. I just give you a quick heads up, a fair warning, whatever you call it. This story is a bit harem-y. If you're not sure what that is, it's when the main character starts collecting and having a group of women who kind of follow him around. You know, it's a trope from a lot of Japanese, South Korean, Chinese novels and anime series. And that's what happens here. There's no graphic sex in this story. It is just the main character happening to collect a lot of good-looking women with superpowers. But if that really does bother some people. So if it does, there you go, letting you know about it. Okay. Now the first half of the story is really all about resource management and social connections. Remember that the main character's power is to upgrade the things that he owns, including people if they're slaves, and improve them. And the main character has a limited amount of resources to renew each day, and he kind of has to decide how he wants to best spend those resources to improve his situation in life. Is he going to improve a slave's physical conditions, give them powers, enhance their powers, make them look better? A lot of the slaves come in really damaged, so that is a real concern. Or is he going to use these points to try to make money, which is also part of the storyline, because the main character starts out really poor. And of course, each new superhero he buys gains him more points he can use every day to upgrade things that he owns. So there's a real cost management kind of situation for the character, which I found totally super fascinating. He has to weigh the cost of investing in new slaves versus making more money, and what's he going to spend his points on each day to kind of maximize the benefit to him. And that part of resource management stuff is really fun to me. This section of the story is definitely my favorite portion of it. And if you're into resource management games, then you're really going to like this story. Combat for this first half of the part of the story is really minimal. We really just focus on that resource management stuff. However, the last 30% of the story really just becomes more about action. Like there's almost action now on every other page practically. It becomes a big superhero brawl with the League of Superheroes targeting the main character's growing organization. And there's some really, really great fight scenes there. Now, the only complaint I have, this is minor, is that it takes an awful lot of attacks on the main character before he starts taking proactive action against the people attacking him. And for me, it just stretched my belief a little bit too far. And again, it was minor. I push it aside. But I was like, after like the fourth or fifth time, like, why isn't he doing something? He has people with superpowers. you think he would be able to find them. I mean, that's just me, and I understand it's part of the storyline. Author's decision choice to kind of stretch out the story a little bit and make it cohesive, but it was a plot thing in my brain. But overall, had a really good time reading the story, read it into one sitting, and besides like those minor personal issues or whatever, I really enjoyed both the resource management aspects and the actiony battle stuff. So that's me. I guess a score of 8 out of 10. There you go. Okay, that's it, everyone. Thank you very much for listening and watching. You can follow us again on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. And again, if you want to support the podcast, feel free to share the podcast on your social media stuff. It's free. It's a free action to you, but it really does help spread the word forward the podcast and help other people find all the LitRPG love that, the podcast gives. And if you want to support us any other way, of course, you can go to litrpgpodcast.com/support and find out all the ways to do so. But again, until we can hang out again next week, folks, thank you. Thank you for hanging out with me and let me talk about this thing that I love, LitRPG. So again, until I can see you and talk to you again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody. Hey everybody, this is Ramon Mejia from the LitRPG Podcast. Just saying hello, welcome, hola, getting all prepared for the actual show. Okay, looks like I got everything all set up here. Do my stretches, lion face, lemon face, ooh, lion face, lemon face. La 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 la, ricola. Yeah. Okay.